Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to Space for Change. This is our April edition. We do this every month, and we've been doing it for a year. All the topics are voted for you, by you as a community, and thank you for showing up. I know this is an interesting time. I know this is an intergalactic, global effort here as well. Oh, I'm getting a little bit of sexy feedback. Space for Change team, look at the panelists and maybe mute. Hello? Oh, that's much better. Much better. Thank you. I sounded like I am on Mars, or maybe I am. You'll never know. All right, so let's jump into this. Firstly, welcome aboard. I would love it if you jump into the chat. Let us know where in the world you are dialing in from, so I can call you out and say hello, and yeah, jump in the chat. Where are you dialing in from? Let's get to know you a bit more. So we've got Melbourne, we've got Danielle in Melbourne, we've got Josephine in Melbourne, Deline in Blackheath. I'll see you next week there. Wow, Philippines, Texas as well. We've got Denver, Colorado, New York. Wow, Charlotte, Canberra. Hey, Teresa, good morning from Sydney. Susie's in Quianabayan near Canberra. Okay, I'm going to have to learn how to pronounce that. New York City, Caroline. Dorian's from Nottingham. We've got Louise in Melbourne. Welcome. Vicky from Hillsville, Yarra Valley. Nice one. Good wine there. And Paul, good to see you, the author of Switch. Really nice to have you on board. Alice from Sydney. Folks, so good to see you. I'm just going to let in a few people. We've had a few last minute attendees come in. So let's jump into this. Our topic for this month is all about real psychological safety, particularly as we lead people through change, as we lead people into this brave new world that we are all in at the moment. And Christina sends her apologies. She got hit with a bit of a migraine, but our whole panel is here and I can't wait to introduce them. We have an intercontinental panel. So we didn't want to just limit this to an Australian or an American or a UK perspective. So we've really spread our wings out with this. And bringing you some people from across the world with some incredible experience. Now, it's a really interesting topic because who watched the Oscars? Had to bring this up, right? And I was sort of thinking about it, and everyone's talking about Will Smith, and everyone's talking about Jada and all the drama, but I was looking at it from Chris Rock's perspective. And here's a gentleman, this is his job. That stage is his workplace. And how psychologically safe do you think he feels now every time he goes up on stage to tell a joke? So I think it's a very interesting topic because where do we draw in the line? If we go too psychological safe, maybe that gives people way too much permission to do some of the naughty things like Will Smith, and God bless him, you know, he is a human. And if we go the other way, and don't talk about psychological safety, we'll end up alienating people in the workplace and creating tension that hits production quite hard. So we're going to dive into this. But the first thing is we want to hear from you, our incredible community. So what I'm going to ask you to do is grab your phone and scan in. I'm sure most of us know how to scan in now after the last 2 years. So scan in, or you can go on your browser on your phone and go to ahaslides.com/safe space. So I'm just going to bring, oh, sorry, it's not safe space, it's psych safe. I need to just change that. Apologies for the browser users. It's SciSafe. It didn't change. So as you join in, we've got 11 people, 12 people. Scanning's the best way. But if you are using a browser, ahaslides.com/PSYSAFE, we've got 19 people in there. I'll give us a bit of time. And let's get your views as a community, and let's put this together in you know, using our collaborative technology here. I see we've got about 22. I'm going to give it a few more minutes. All right. So let's go into this a little bit more. So what exactly might we mean by psychological safety, and what does it mean for you specifically? Wow, there's some great stuff here. It's all about accepting diversity. I love inclusion. That is so core to our heart at Earth to Mars. And it's the reason why we train people up, why we approach things with human-centered design, as well as inclusive collaborative technology. Safe to be myself. There's trust. Thank you. Such a big core element of psychological safety. Listening, supporting, confidence. It's a safe space. Room for error. Absolutely. We need to start letting go of this perfectionist idea of work and realize that we learn from mistakes, grow from mistakes. It's stability. It's acceptance, ability to speak up. Big one. These are great, guys. I think we can leave it at that and close up our laptops and walk away. I think you guys have nailed it. Please don't do that, by the way. Some great stuff. And what I'm going to do is keep these coming in. Wow, we've got 55. Oh, it's 20. Sorry, there's 55 reactions there. I'm going to export this and I'll share this in the Space for Change group on LinkedIn. Excellent. I'm going to move on to the next question. Thank you for your incredible replies. How would you rate your current level of psychological safety at work? Not at home, because some days I feel safe at home, some days I don't, depending on the mood of my partner. But at work, where would we say? So we've got a few people slowly getting there. Wow, we've got 2 people who feel completely free to show their full self. That's me. I know my team's probably in there as well. And we definitely have some people going, hey, get me out of here. It's a problem. And thank you for calling that out. And thank you for being honest about that. Because we've got to be real about these things if we're going to discuss it, but also if we're going to affect any change, we've got to get real. So it looks like most people on the call are sort of slowly getting there and might be interested in sort of some tips to see if it is psychologically safe and how to enhance it. I'm really, really excited to hear from the people that feel fully free to be themselves. And yeah, it's really good to acknowledge that some people are sitting there in a workplace feeling unsafe. And thank you for calling it out. This is the space to do it. All right, I've got one more question for our amazing participants. What's the reason for your answer? Why do you say that? What makes it safe for you? What makes it getting there? But also what makes it help get me out of there? It takes time to get there. Absolutely. It is. It's a process. It's a journey. Sometimes we take 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, and that's how we learn and build trust. I owned the business. I created the culture. I love it. Me too. It's nice when you're in that position. I'm in a new team, so still working it out. Yes, just being new feels a little bit psychologically unsafe, which we can take responsibility for. It's a new role, still learning, not sure if I can admit to mistakes yet. I agree. I've worked for an organization where there's consequences for making mistakes, and I left there after a few months. It just wasn't worth it. I'm fortunate to be in a team of enlightened change makers. Wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. And the role of change leaders is so important in this new age as well, because we're dealing with people in their highs, their lows, and going through change. 6 months from home. Oh, this is a juicy one. I've worked here for 6 months from home, and suddenly I need to go into an office, and I've never been in an office with people before in this team. I think that's going to come up in our discussion quite loud and clear. Guys, these are fantastic. Again, I am going to share this in the Space for Change LinkedIn group. If you haven't joined that LinkedIn group, really worthwhile doing it, because we share content, we share recordings, and we also vote for future topics. So all you have to do is search for Space for Change on LinkedIn, and we'll share that at the end. Thank you so much. Let us dive into this topic. So we've got a really, really cool little video that one of our course attendees actually shared with us last week in America. Who here has heard of the elephant and the rider in terms of how our brains work? I think it's Maria. I think Maria actually was the one who shared it. Awesome. I'm going to play it because I think it's worth us having a look at this very quickly. And then we're going to dive into our panel discussion. So I'm just going to optimize for video. So we might see the cameras go off for a second.
Psychologists know that there are two systems in our brains, the rational system and the emotional system. Jonathan Haidt, who's a psychologist at NYU, came up with a great analogy for these two systems. He said, think of your brain as a human rider atop an elephant. The rider represents the rational system. That's the part of us that plans and problem solves. The rider might do some analyzing and decide, hey, I want to go that way. But it's the elephant, representing the emotional system, that provides the power for the journey. The rider can try to lead the elephant or drag the elephant, but if these two ever disagree, who would you bet on? The elephant has a 6-ton weight advantage, and it's exactly that power imbalance that makes adopting new behaviors very hard. If you want this duo to head a new direction, you also need to think about the path, which represents the external environment. This duo is more likely to complete a journey if you can shorten the distance and remove any obstacles in their way. So bottom line, if you want to lead change, you've got to do 3 things. Give direction to the rider, knowledge of how to get to the destination. You've got to motivate the elephant, which means tapping into emotion. And finally, you need to shape the path to allow for easy progress. That's how change happens.
Whoops, that kind of a little early, but that's okay. I think you got the concept. I love this because it breaks down why psychological safety is so important, especially if you're leading change or a team, because if we don't tap into that emotional side, it becomes a huge issue. And the way we like to talk about it at Earth Mars, there we go, sorry about that, is generally in change. We've seen people go through a lot of emotions, not just with what happened with that whole pandemic, remember that, but also with what's going on in the world, what's going on in their personal lives. And what we have picked up in change, this is as simple as we can make it. When emotions go up, either super happy or super sad, the rational brain starts playing less of a feature. So if we don't tap into these emotions, consider them in the workplace, we're actually ignoring the true power and true force of moving people forward. So feel free to check that video out. We'll obviously share it in the group, or Hugo or Anna, can you just put the link in the chat? So if anyone wants to see it for themselves later, great to share with teams. So let's get into it. Welcome to our incredible panel. I'm so excited about this panel. We've got Dr. Josephine Palermo. We've worked together for some time. We actually met on one of our courses a while back, and we just haven't stopped working together, which I love. So she's very researched in the space of psychological safety and organizational psychology as well. But also she runs lots of different businesses, very unique and different businesses, from co-working spaces to belly dancing schools. But the common thread in all her businesses is psychological safety and taking care of people. So really happy to have you here. Thank you, Josephine. We've then got Laverne. Laverne is all the way in the UK. So thanks for joining us at this ungodly hour in the evening. And Laverne has some real lived experience. She has had one of the most eclectic careers, from coffee barista to change leader for big organizations. And she's had some lived experience. So she's going to share about the reality of what good and bad looks like. And then we've got Maria Fanto from the US, who's just about to get certified, which I'm really, really excited about. Maria works in the workplace strategy space. So very much in how we create workspaces, experiences, anything to do with the design of the office. Maria's had a very big operational experience in terms of operationalizing psychological safety. So I think we have such a great panel here. And if it's okay with everybody else, I'd like to just jump in to the conversation. Now, we were going to try immersive view, but I realized that people are dialing in from phones or browsers, it's not going to work. So what we'll do is keep chatting to us in the chat while you're talking. You're welcome to comment, give us reactions, but we're going to now open it up to the panel. So welcome, panel. Come off mute and say hello to our Space for Change audience.
Hello, everybody. Hello.
Good to see you all. So let's, I'm actually going to stop sharing so we can just rather focus on you and your cameras. Let's get into it. Why? Question for the panel. Why is psychological safety becoming such a hot topic? I put this out and people said the same thing consistently. They're like, oh, this is a good topic. Oh, we love it. And when our group voted for it, I sort of wondered, well, why is this coming up and why now? So questions to the panel.
Andrew, I'm happy to go first. Hi, everybody. I've been doing a lot of work with teams who are really and organizations who are right now experiencing a lot of change because we're in this post-pandemic stage of the world globally, and of course we've been through so much change already. And what that's done is actually given people an experience of more autonomy in the way that work is done. We've actually had some accelerated trends around the way in which we relate to the work and each other in a way. So, we've had this kind of global experiment in flexibility. Yeah. And now people are kind of grappling with the need to revert back to either coming back to the office or coming back into public spaces. That does produce anxiety, but it also there's also a little bit of conflict or dissonance because people don't want to go back to the old workplace norms we had before. So I think that's why psychological safety is on our minds right now, because we want to do it better. We want to create, we've experienced something different, and we don't want to go back to those old cultures that we were in before. So that's kind of that's my guess stability on that.
Love it. Absolutely love it.
And definitely to go off of that as well, I think it's something that's not easily definable, right? It's not something you're going to pull up the Webster's dictionary and say, this is what it is. It's not a one size fits all. So I think you're hearing about it a lot because different types of organizations or different groups are doing it and trying all these new ways. And what works for one doesn't work for somebody else, or maybe it works in an organization one way, even regionally, like forget about countries or where you sit. When you're sitting at different regions and what's impacting you regionally, you're definitely having to take a big step back. And I don't think leaders and organizations can answer it for teams because you can't answer it individually. So we're all looking at each other saying, what's working for you? What's working for you? Oh, okay, that's a really good idea. And then you test it and you go, that didn't really work 100% for me. Or maybe it only works 60%. So what are you doing the next step? And every company, in organization, you can even say like, oh, some went back early. Some are still trying to go back. Some aren't going back at all, right? So you can tell everyone's in this different flow of feelings with it.
Amazing.
I was going to say that I think with everyone coming back as well, there's that kind of organizational level kind of, oh, how do we get people back? Should we talk to them and ask them what they think? That kind of trying to pull these miracle answers from the staff and everyone, as I think I've said to you, Andrew, everyone has their own little, I need this and I have yoga on a Thursday at 5 and my dog needs this. And so we have all these little needs. And I think organizations are realizing that some people will and will not express themselves when asked the truth. So you kind of have to work on psychological safety. It's just become the buzzword in every organization that I've worked in recently. It's just like, oh yeah, we need to really get this for people. So but it doesn't happen overnight. So the why is because it's needed, but the how, well, I guess you'll go on to that one, Andrew.
Well, we're going to go in that together. I think the two words I loved was experiment. We've come out of this big experiment, as Josephine said, but we also can't just overnight be psychologically safe. We've almost got to test and learn, which is a totally different mindset to the traditional way of doing work, where leaders just come and tell you these things. So I love that. And isn't it interesting that this has become a panel discussion because, our audience voted for this topic, but we also ourselves at Earth realized there's stuff for us to learn in this space. So it is a shared conversation. I'm so grateful we're having it. So I would ask you guys, well, I'm a layman. I like to use normal words. I avoid words like resilience and all these sort of buzzwords. And I like to get real. So I'm curious of the panel, what does it mean for you if you're talking to your clients, if you're talking to colleagues about psychological safety? What do we really mean here at a really simple level?
Well, I might just start with what you mentioned in the intro, that sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly in terms of psychological safety of what I've experienced. So I guess from the ugly in, a team, the dynamic's been kind of maybe very power or autocratic, kind of up there, the big boss. And the ugly version of psychological safety, because it doesn't exist, is that the boss would completely humiliate a team member. You must have all experienced this. Somebody's been completely humiliated. No one says anything. Everyone's relieved that they're not the victim this time, embarrassed that they've got no guts to say anything, and just terrified that they'll be next or something, to draw attention to themselves. So that's the ugly. The bad, I personally believe, is when a leader or a manager would say, oh, this terrible thing happened in my life, and my experience is this, and then expect everyone else to share as a result of like one story, and that's bad. That's not how easy it is. And I guess an example of the good would be when I've been in teams where the leader actually comes to the space and says, I want us as a team to go on a journey of creating a safer space for all of us, to creating honesty, feedback, accountability, responsibility, engagement, inclusive, all those things. And they know, though, that is the start of quite a lengthy journey in a team. That is the very good, I think.
I love that, Laverne. I love that because it's so true, isn't it? We've seen that cringe when those leaders, because people have good intentions, but it's clunky. It's clunky. So absolutely. And can I add? I think absolutely I agree with Laverne. I also think psychological safety is a group concept. It's not something we feel on our own. And I think, Maria, you touched on this before too. It's important to know it is something that happens in a group. So really defining the belief in a group is really important. You can't have psychological safety in a team or a group unless everyone feels it. It's an aspect of culture. So and it's the belief that we can actually speak up without retribution, and that also new ideas are welcome. So but that's a group phenomena, and that's why it's a little bit hard to kind of put your finger on it sometimes, I think. So it's because of that.
Juicy group phenomena. I love that.
I definitely agree. It has to be that team effort. It has to be that. And I think, you make movies off of this, right? When you have like your favorite sports movie, when the team comes together and everyone wins, and yes, right. And like, or the underdog story, and they come through, and like, why does the underdog win? Right. It has to do with that safety within each other, that maybe they know they're not the best, or maybe they know they shouldn't win, or they're not going to win the 9 times, but that 1 time out of 10 that they do, it's that huge story that everyone can get behind and everyone feels good about. That's really proof of that psychological safety is within your partners and within your groups. And I think if everyone on this panel can sit back and say, whether it was a team, a school project, university, why you love certain groups and certain classes is probably because when you had that group project, you were like, this is amazing, instead of the one that was like, oh my gosh, this is awful, I'm never going to show up with this group, I don't want to meet with them, right? That carries through every section and every kind of cycle of our lives. Teams, universities, work, it all plays through on those things.
And also, can I just add, when we look at the research on psychological safety, and Amy Edmondson from Harvard University did some really fantastic work on teams, what we find is actually psychological safety is an emergent process that comes out of a really good team. So it's sort of something that comes from having a team that has very clear and compelling purpose, having a team that has really strong norms, and having a team that really understands and leverages the strengths and diversity of each team member. So it's not it's sort of it's something that we know is predicted by those things. So if you're kind of thinking about a definition, the definition kind of has a little bit of the how in it as well, because you can't have psychological safety, for example, if people are really unclear about why they're even there, or there's, kind of conflict about that, or if there's conflict, if people are being rude to each other, in terms of their behaviors, and the norms aren't quite right. So it's a kind of through line from those kind of things.
And I truly think that goes back to so many of the things. It's not what you're saying, right? Or anytime, it's like always like, did you hear how that person said that? Or like how that leader just announced that? It's not actually what that leader announced or what was said in the meeting. It's all about the how.
It is. It's all about the how. But I'm loving where we're going with this, because what I'm hearing is it's almost like the outcome. Psychological safe teams is the phenomenon, the outcome, if we focus on getting our team culture right or our team dynamic right. And what I'm hearing is it's a bit of a journey, and it's not just the leader's responsibility. It's not just the individual's responsibility. And I'm going to go back to that Oscar example. Like, I loved what Laverne said, because the Oscars showed the farce in terms of everybody, this happened and everybody just sat down and sat back and continued. And I think in a team that is connected, that it can empathize, that is aligned and knows the goal, and has the elephant sort of engaged with, that wouldn't fly.
Where was the support? Where was someone saying, "Hang on a minute, this is not in service of our vision of the academy"? Where was that?
And I sort of look at it just saying, I think it's a really good metaphor to describe what's happening at work, is we're starting to realize the bullshits of the pageantry, of the sort of dressing up and pretending we're not human and we're just these perfect sort of beings. And the reality is we're all human. Even if you're Will Smith, we're human. We have emotions. We have really bad days. And does it mean we need to disrespect each other? No. But at the same time, for me, the last 2 years have helped our clients and our team smell the bullshit better. And this is where I'm going with my next question is, do you think social media and, at Space for Change, we often talk about a hyper-connected world. Do you think all this modern technology, hyper-connection, social media has anything to do with where we're going with psychological safety?
I think that's an interesting question, Andrew. I'm not really social media savvy. Anyone that knows me would know that my LinkedIn is just a mess. But I would say that I feel like, I look at my daughter, she's nearly 14, and she's so transparent, and everything is, and she a lot of people expect to know everything. And with, that makes me feel in the workplace, I think I've had feedback, you don't share, you're not part of, and as if I'm not sort of being authentic, but actually maybe I'm not ready to, or whatever. So there's kind of that the social media pressure is giving us this openness, but without trust necessarily, and where that information is going, or the people. I find that it's going to be it would be difficult for me to sort of disclose all without having that trust first in the circle that's within. I don't know. What do you think, Maria?
I mean, I love social media on certain things, and I also think I don't like it on so many things. I think the problem is, I was actually listening to a podcast this morning, and a new company is coming out that they tell you the time of day, they alert you, you can post one picture a day, and you have to take the photo, and that's like what you post out, right? And I think part of that is because you're perfection, right? Like, you look at, I can't imagine, thank God I didn't have social media as like a 14-year-old, because my body image, or what people think, or what the party I wasn't invited to, or all those things that are so common, I think would really be difficult. And I think it's not true psychological safety, because you're still only showing what you want to show, right? And I think in like how you want to show it, right? You don't show that you were delayed in the airport and your feet were up front. You just show that, hey, I went to Australia and visited Andrew, and here he was, like, holding my back, right? Like, with his arms open, like, Maria, you're here, right? That's all you show. you don't show the layover, the 24-hour flight and how long it takes me to get there. And, you're zonked out on a plane and probably drooling. Like, you don't show any of those like real image parts. And I think that goes back to the Oscars piece, is that like people have true reactions, and those real reactions.
I was quite relieved in a sense. I was like, wow, we put Will Smith on a pedestal, but wow, there's the truth. This is someone who's spent the last 2 years with all of us going through what we've gone through. And it's a human reaction. Wherever you stand on it, it doesn't matter. It is part of our human psyche. Guys, I've got a juicy question from Charles. Thank you so much. I love this one because I've seen people do this, where they come into a session like this and they introduce it like I did and go, guys, this is a psychologically safe place. It's a safe space for everybody, and they declare psychological safety. What's the panel thoughts on this? Is this appropriate? Do we need to call it out? What's the thoughts there?
I would just laugh.
Yeah, what's that?
I'd say, thank you so much for saying that, but we all know it's not true. We've only just met.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think the intention is noble, right? The intention is to be, applauded. But if we go back to what's happening in the social space, you can't. What that leader's doing is almost trying to, with a magic wand, say, I've got total control of this space. And in fact, that leader doesn't have total control of the social space. Social space is created through agreement and coordination across people, across members. So a better thing for the leader to do is say, hey, I would really like to create a space today where we're all safe to be ourselves and speak up when we need to, and even perhaps give each other some, even negative feedback if that's appropriate. How would we do that today? What are some norms we could put in place for that to happen? It would be better for him or her to come in with an inquiry or a curiosity about that, rather than declaring, this is a safe space. Yeah.
Yeah, because I almost think it's a facade then at that point, right? Like, you're not really doing that. It's almost like, do what what's the saying? Like, you do what I say, not what I do, right? Like, how are you building that up is kind of, you're breaking down your own walls little by little, into the point of, building relationships or building those things. You're not going to have it if you're starting the new role. Like, I would not suggest you do that in your first team meeting, right? Like, I think there's some ways to build that up, and over time, right, it's probably naturally going to happen, or like, your meetings aren't always around a board table. You're getting up, you're doing different activations within your team. You're figuring out new ways to work the space. Or I know, like, when you do the Earth to Mars, class that Andrew offers, and just using it sticky notes or different ways, how we were using on our phones today, right, to open up those things. Hearing people's voices is the way you're truly showing and being that leader in that space, instead of just being like, create the space. Here we are. Let's do this.
I do. I think some leaders might be stuck in the industrial age or the information age, where they're used to telling people and people just accept. And it's the same for me in change, because I think we came from a world with cookie cutters and templates and, PowerPoints and all of that. Now we can Google all that stuff. But really, my role has shifted in terms of leading change from telling people to change to more co-creating that change with them, asking them how they'd like to receive the change. And what we've seen is a huge drive away from telling people into more of the coaching people, asking people, sharing with people. And I think what was tough for me personally was I had to let go. Like Josephine said, I can't control this dynamic. I can't do it by just telling people they're safe. But if I am working on a conversation, agreement, and trust, which brings me to Paul Matthews. He's posted something amazing in the chat. He says, evidence shows that if we start a meeting by telling a story that shows us as vulnerable and making images, so rather demonstrating as opposed to telling, then others are more likely to do so in a group. It helps reduce fear and demonstrates safety rather than demands. What's your thoughts on that?
I just responded to Paul on that, actually. So there we go. I actually coach leaders with storytelling, and I think you can do that by creating some structure for them in their storytelling. Because again, it's not something like, to Laverne's point or earlier, you don't just want to go blah and then expect people to say, wow, that's a great story. I have to share something that's super personal too. And there's a lot of, I can share a link. There's been some work on public narrative around a structured story that actually helps people understand your values. And what that story often is actually presenting a kind of time in the life where perhaps you were challenged and you had to make a choice, and how your values drove that choice for you, and then what was the outcome. So it's a very structured story, but it helps people understand you from a values perspective, and that's important in terms of really creating a culture and a space where people can go back to their core selves around what they value and what their core values are. And I think then you're getting to vulnerability that is that has a bit of a sort of frame around it. So it's not vulnerability that is perhaps unleashed without the benefit of the whole group in mind, because I think sometimes people can unleash vulnerability because it serves them and not the group. So I think that I'll put a link in the chat if people are interested in that.
No, I was just going to say, I agree with you, because I think when somebody shares, it could be just way too much and the group is not ready, and we haven't sort of contracted to kind of be that group yet. We're not friends, we're just colleagues, or we've just as a new team member or something like that. So we haven't agreed that we're all going to share our deepest, darkest secrets and fears and stuff like that. So it can feel a bit too intrusive, I think. And what am I supposed to say to that? I'm sitting there thinking, wow, awkward. So I think you have to kind of be very careful with that. But I like the setup that you proposed there, Joe. I think that was quite nice. I like that.
And I think sort of structures give results. I know that's what I had to go through, because I felt the pressure like any other change leader to be vulnerable and do it, but I didn't have the structure to tell stories. And it was only until I went more into the sort of dramatic art side of the world that really had good structures to set up a story so that it lands in the right way. And we've included it in all the ways we coach up change leaders, executives, because if you've got that structure, it's a lot easier to lean on as opposed to just bearing all. Which brings me to Louisa's question. Is where do we draw the line here? Do we just let it all hang out? I love that. Because, we are living in a society where there's norms, there's cultures, but at the same time, we want to feel psychologically safe. Is there a line somewhere that we draw? Because I personally think if we go all the other way and we're just bearing it up, we're not going to get work done. And if we go all the work way, we're ignoring the elephant. What are your thoughts with that? Do we need to draw a line with psychological safety at some point?
I think so. I think there's a happy medium or some sort of balance. But again, I think that's really your personal choice and where you are, where your team is, where your organization is, also where you play in that organization and what kind of levels, right? It also doesn't mean that, Andrew, the CEO, has to have that same psychological level of safety with everybody. Maybe you just have that with certain levels of people in your organization. Maybe that's a part of building those good relationships and partners, right? Is that you're not going to have that with everyone. And I think that's also okay, right? You don't have to be friends with everyone, or your level of working relationship can totally be different and should be different with everyone, because everyone is unique and brings something different to the table. And I think part of that is admitting that your safety levels with some compared to others is different. And I think that's how you kind of find that balance, and you're not going, oh, I have to be friends with everyone. Okay, well, we all can't be, as much as we all think we should or would like to be. Like, that's not realistic. So where is that balance?
I really love that, Maria, because I think that it is about where you're reading the room in terms of where people are at, but where you're at as well. And I've got a lovely story in a way. I've been working with a CEO who is very comfortable with her own vulnerability, but that's who she is. So to give you an idea, she got some engagement results recently that were really lower than she expected. And when she was reporting back to the whole organization about it, she actually got very emotional and actually almost she went into tears and said that she was so sorry that these were results that really hit her at the heart because she cares a lot. Now, the group accepted that because that's who she is. They've seen her be vulnerable in other situations in the same way, and she really does lead by the heart. However, if she was someone who hadn't demonstrated that earlier and then suddenly she's having this emotional kind of response, people would be horrified, frankly. Right?
That is so helpful. That is
Yeah, they'd call her inauthentic, just like putting on the tears completely.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think we're onto something. I think maybe it's less about trying to be vulnerable to get psychological safety and more about being authentic and finding comfort in our own authenticity as we lead people, either through change, through teams, through operations, whatever it is. Now, I know the big one on everybody's mind is, well, a lot of us are in the process of rewilding the office place. How do we sort of start tackling this practically? So, we've had this great little bubble where we've created psychologically safe little bubbles at home or office spaces or coffee shops or co-working spaces. What do leaders, teams, change people, learning people, comms people need to really consider doing when it comes to working out this new hybrid world and doing it in a safe way?
I think one of the things that we could work better at is having even just considering hybrid meetings. So when somebody's at home and then somebody's in the office, oh my goodness, those are such a challenge. And lots of people just haven't figured out so if everyone's in the room, but there's like one person on a screen over there, how do you bring that person in? So one of the things that I learned on your course, actually, Andrew, was, technology, using that as the kind of a common denominator, as it were, Miro or Trello or anything, Teams, whiteboard, or whatever you want to call it, to then kind of bring everyone into the same room. So instead of having the stickies on the actual wall, maybe that's one of the things that you could do, have the stickies on, everyone's on their laptop, and you kind of all doing it together still, but you're including that couple of people who are in a different country or in a different time zone or at home. That was one of the things that's bugged me. And then also I wouldn't have to get up and show my new larger backside to the new team that I'm working with.
I've got the same problem, so I so connect with that one. Safe space.
Sorry, that's me oversharing.
I love it. So we've got collaborative technology to bring us together. What else?
I think that there's a new type of leadership required, and I've been talking a lot about with teams about compassionate leadership, because it's got to be more personal than it has been before. And so if you're a leader and you're not spending time really getting to know people and really having those one-on-one conversations to understand people's individual preferences and really understand what their experience has been like, then you're missing the boat. And compassionate leadership is about noticing the feelings involved as well, and then empathizing, but also acting. So it's not just about empathy, it's actually about acting on what you're hearing. So, individual differences do matter. We know that, 40% of employees globally are thinking about leaving their employer at the moment. And that's because, they're not seeing this alignment. So individual differences do absolutely matter. But you're obviously not going to be able to meet everybody's needs when you've got the whole organization that you're responsible for. So that can only be resolved through that compassionate leadership, individual conversations that where you're sharing, your care for that person, and what you can and can't act on, and because it's a mutual responsibility, coming back to a reimagined work day. There's a responsibility for the leader and employees, obviously. So there's this real change kind of journey that people need to go on through that conversation.
Yeah, and I definitely think, to go off of that too, it's also when you're having like different ways to show that compassion, right? We did things where, like, it's, if you could have a one-on-one with your manager or with someone, we gave out everyone like a free latte card right here on site. And what we also did, though, is we sent them to different places, and we sent them to people's home who are remote. So that way, like, we were all having, like, you and I were both having a cup of coffee, right? And you're just kind of taking that barrier around of, like, you're not doing the to-do list today. You're not doing my weekly, how's the status of this project, right? You're doing those times of, you're skipping the must-have conversations, and you're saying, okay, Andrew, how are you today? What's happening? Or, I noticed you, took time off last week and it seemed a little stressed over it. I want to make sure you're good about it. Like, you're taking a deep breath. I know you're coming back to a lot of emails, and really going through some of those pieces as well.
I love this. And we've spoken about our responsibility as leaders and change to drive this, but I'm going to flip this on the head, because often on LinkedIn, I have grammar Nazis constantly going into my post and correcting stuff. Have you ever experienced a sort of psychologically safe Nazi that might sort of, everything's psychologically unsafe and it's all about them? Because I know I've experienced that, and it got to so disruptive that it almost felt like the whole team was being audited, and everything we had to say had to be PC and trauma-informed and all these kind of things. We actually removed that person off the team after 6 months, because the focus was all on their psychological safety, as opposed to the balance of also delivering and doing their bloody job. So how do you respond to that? Like, is there a dark side to this where sort of someone might use this as a way to sort of distract from what we really mean here?
Yeah, I really love that question, Andrew, because I think you're right. It can be used, because when things become buzzwords, it can be used and abused. And there is a bit of, we've been talking about some of the definitions of psychological safety, but people will focus on how safe I feel, and that that I need to feel safe in all times, and actually psychological safety, when you create that in a group, is not about you feeling safe at all times in terms of comfort. It's about you being safe to feel challenged in an environment, and to receive feedback that can be uncomfortable at times. And that's not just the leader receiving feedback, that's everybody being able to receive feedback. I always talk about feedback, you can accept it as a gift of learning or a colonoscopy, if anybody's old enough on the group to know what that is. Because sometimes it does feel like a colonoscopy, but absolutely, if you need to, I've had to teach myself to feel more comfortable with negative feedback. Nobody likes negative feedback, but so it's not about making sure that everyone feels comfortable. That is definitely not what psychological safety is about. And you will have people sort of trying to use that as a way to keep in their comfort zone, because it sounds like when that's happening, that person's saying, I'm uncomfortable, something's got to stop because I need to go back to my comfort zone.
Bingo. I'm so glad you said that, because that's the real essence for me. Like, we still have to work together to develop stuff. So there's a personal responsibility. I know as a business owner, if we don't have situations that aren't uncomfortable, that aren't a little bit scary, we don't grow, we don't learn, we don't create. So, we always say, there's such an opportunity in a crisis. The point is that we all feel safe to work together to address that crisis, but it's not about making every single person feel comfortable about everything. I personally can't keep up with every single pronoun. I personally can't keep up with every single culture, but what I do want is an environment where we can talk openly and share, as opposed to judging each other around psychological safety. Last question, let's get real. Are there sort of stages or hacks or real tips to start building I guess, a good team culture where we can have the outcome of psychological safety?
Totally. And I think the first step is you need to admit to yourself and to everyone on your team, there's never a good day to get uncomfortable. So you better start getting uncomfortable today, right? I think that you're never going to sit there and be like, I want to really just be so vulnerable today. Like, I'm going to ask a silly question. I'm going to ask the dumb one. Or, like sometimes when you say like, I feel like I should know the answer to this, but right, like somebody started those things, like really starting to just live that yourself, I think is kind of that step one in acknowledging that like it's okay to be uncomfortable. And here's our goal, right? Like if you go back to my example about the underdog, the reason the underdog wins once in a while, or hopefully more than once, is because they all get really uncomfortable and admit their flaws, but they still know what the goal is. So you need to listen to everyone, but that's not changing the goal, right? If someone is saying to Josephine's point, I'm uncomfortable, I totally understand you're uncomfortable. Allow me to help you, or allow me to recommend someone who can help you, being okay with being uncomfortable, because we still need to win the game, right? Like you need to put the ball in the back of the net. So how are we going to do that together? I think is really, really important.
I just want to pick up, you said, listening is a really essential part of this for me. And we don't do it. I'm not the best active listener, and I try and practice, but I
don't think anybody is the best active listener in this age.
Exactly, I know, and our attention spans are now zero basically, so we're always multitasking. You go on meetings and someone's there the whole time and you're trying to engage with them. So listening is one of those things where if we got it right, imagine if we all actually really listened and heard what was said, and then took that what we've heard and then did something with it, and then asked the proper question that brings another really great answer, and heard that, it would be really great. But it doesn't happen overnight. It's not easy, but I think listening is one of the key things to start doing, really practicing actively.
Love it. So we're saying listening, we're saying getting in there, being authentic. Any particular sort of mindsets we need to bring to the table? Any sort of, there's so many toolkits, research out there, particularly in terms of change. Like I know with change specifically, and all of us, I think if you're a leader in this space, change is the normal. So you don't have to have a change manager. We're all responsible for change, but do the current ways of us rolling out change in organizations really echo all the things that we're saying in psychological safety? And if not, or if so, what can we do differently?
Andrew, I think when I think about change, I think that resistance becomes more of an issue to really create if I'm thinking of a change program, if you want to create psychological safety in your change program, you need to be focusing on resistance. So leaning into it with a bit more curiosity, or even anticipating the resistance and seeking it. So it's about being more curious about those things, those opinions, those ideas that are counter to where you are, where your ideas and opinions are, and also maybe creating spaces where you're just asking people for those ideas that are counter. So, maybe setting up a space where, a nightmare scenario space, having a discussion where what's the worst thing that could go wrong here, or let's go, rather than, because we tend to have an optimism bias, and especially with change people, we are super optimistic people. That's why we're in change. So we tend to have a bias towards optimism. So setting out a space where it's just about those things that can go wrong, or perhaps those people that have a different view. Let's hear from them, give them that space, and then kind of go into that with a bit of curiosity, and really asking for that feedback that maybe you wouldn't get unless you create that particular space for that.
I really like that idea, actually. I've not thought of that, but I think I'd like to take it on and steal that idea, if that's okay, Joe. One of the things that I do is similar, I suppose, but not quite the same, is I because I used to own a coffee shop, I call it frothing up. So frothing up, uncomfortable have conversations that, you know, may lead to something, may lead to nothing. But as I've done that technique in organizations, it's always led to something being, you know, as a result of just a conversation that was a bit more frank, maybe one-to-one, something like that, that wasn't sort of part of the normal, the nice, which I think a lot of people get psychological safety and nice confused. So we've already discussed that. But yeah, that frothing up sometimes can help. And yeah, I like that uncomfortable space. That sounds really good for me. I'll use it.
Love it.
And Laverne, I love frothing up. I'm gonna steal that one from you. Thank you. Yeah, I think that sometimes people won't tell you what they are really thinking. So a really great question that I've found is, if you knew someone who disagreed with this, what would they say? Or what are the people in your community who are disagreeing with this saying?
Or better yet, ask them.
Or ask them. Yes, but often this is kind of getting around the fact that maybe people don't, again, because we're saying, people don't just feel psychological safe because you say it so. So this is a kind of journey to getting people to really allow for those ideas to come into a space.
Awesome.
I do that a lot. I always try to make it in the third person, or about like, if it's not here, what's over there, and like, so what did you like about this place here, and why did you like that, and what did you feel when you walked in, and do you not feel the same when you come here? Like, how are we kind of making it? Because if I'm the one doing it, they don't want to say, I don't want to hurt Maria's feelings. I don't want to give Maria that feedback.
So it's a really active thing. This is not some academic thing that we need to apply. And I feel like this in the change space. I feel like a lot of the structures we had from the old days were about avoiding the froth, avoiding the resistance, and making it all about selling the benefits. Whereas, for the last 8 years at Earth to Mars, we've done it the other way around. We want to hear the resistance. We want to use that as an opportunity to reframe it or design something. And this is why we are really big on human-centered design, collaborative technology, all these things available at our fingertips to actually facilitate a conversation as opposed to try to fit in an academic model around this. Folks, that's time. I want to thank our panel. Can we all come off mute and give our panel a huge round of applause?
Bravo, well done. Bravo.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening.
Reach out to them on LinkedIn, connect, and we're just going to end off with some really exciting news. So don't jump off. We've got some big things coming. Number one, folks, every quarter, we've been doing this for a year. Every quarter, it is competition time. So we offer a fully paid bursary to actually our accelerator course coming up in May, which covers collaborative tech, human-centered design, all these kind of things. To enter, scan the details there. Hugo's also putting the link in the chat. And we're looking forward to have one of our Space for Change community on board, as we do, because we reserve a seat for you guys every single quarter. So join in. We'd love to see you there. And fingers crossed and good luck to our lucky bursary winner for this quarter. And lastly, we love feedback. So you can use the QR scanner, or Hugo will put the link in there. Please give us feedback. Tell us what topics you want for the next one as well. And if you haven't already, search for Space for Change in LinkedIn and join our LinkedIn group. That's where we vote for topics. That's where we share the recordings. That's where we have similar discussions around this. So a bit of a whirlwind ending. But folks, thank you so much for your time today. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for going wild in the chat. We will share all of this input in our group, and have a psychologically safe weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.